Hey there everybody, welcome back to a new part of Soul Blazer here. Today we're going to, what is it, Magdrid Castle, I believe it is. Like always, let's just head right down and start fighting stuff. Yeah, that skeleton looks suspicious. Right off the bat, it's that tropical music from the earlier level. It doesn't seem to fit as well here. It seems a little out of place. I would have liked something a little more ominous. You know, I'm listening to this music now, and I've got the idea in my head. Like I'm picturing an island and palm trees and coconuts. Your standard skeleton with swords. That's always a pretty basic enemy. Yeah, it's, if you've ever seen the old, I think it was Jason and the Argonauts. They had a famous scene with the fighting skeleton. That's I think it was Ray Harryhausen. If you look that up, you'll recognize his special effects. They're very noticeable. That's basically his trademark. But yeah, that's a famous skeleton fighting scene, and then I think the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad had a similar scene with the skeletons, also Ray Harryhausen. But I think we all know Stalfos from Zelda were the best. Now we just got the Spirit Sword. The Spirit Sword's gonna let us hit these enemies. If you saw, my sword went right through them. Snakes that attack you when you reach their line of sight, so ropers from also Zelda. Sometimes I wonder when I see stuff like this in video games. I wonder if that was the intention. You know, so far we've got Stalfos and ropers. You know, I wonder if the idea was that it was a nice subtle nod to Zelda, without just blatantly putting Zelda enemies in there. I wonder if video game developers do that. You know, these guys, I mean, this is Super Nintendo, so at this point, the people that have worked on this game were most likely Nintendo fans. You know, they may not, it's hard to say they grew up with that stuff, but it doesn't change the fact that it could have very easily influenced what they did and, you know, getting into video games. So I wonder if, especially early on when things like licensing weren't, I don't want to say they weren't focused on as much or they weren't scrutinized as much, but, you know, maybe they thought they could get away with a few more things. So I wonder if they did stuff like that where they threw these kinds of enemies in as tribute to Zelda. You know, or any other company, any other games, if they do stuff like that. And I remember it used to be, I feel like you used to be able to do stuff like that, and nowadays I'd always just think that somebody's gonna try and sue somebody else. Level up. You know, if you're familiar, if you've ever played Bart's Nightmare, there was the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo version, and there was a level with Bartzilla when he's climbing the building and the people are throwing things out the window at you. On the Super Nintendo game, every once in a while someone would throw a Sega Genesis. On the Genesis, they would throw a Super Nintendo. You know, and it wasn't even kind of subtle. They were blatantly those systems, especially because back then they were the two powerhouse systems. They were the most noticeable thing in your house, basically, next to your couch and your VCR. You know, and I don't ever recall anybody getting sued over that. You know, it's a fun little nod to each other. You know, I like that stuff. You know, how great would it be if you were playing something like Overwatch that's on multiple systems, and there was a bomb where you could use that they would rig it up to explode, and, you know, they'd make a comment like, "Oh, these bombs are terrible. That's why we use them." But then if you play the PS4 game, it looks like an old PC or an Xbox One. Or if you play the Xbox One game, it looks like a PS4. Like, nowadays there'd be a lawsuit and people would get in trouble. Or unfortunately, what does happen is no one even bothers to try, because there would be a lawsuit. To me, that would just be more fun. It would be, the game itself is supposed to be fun, and then you've got these little things in there that are, little nods, little jokes back and forth, and that's that sort of rivalry. It just makes things sometimes a lot more interesting. All that Nintendo versus Sega, if you remember all of that, the people who benefited from that the most were probably Sega and Nintendo. Because if you have to choose a side, then you have to choose a side. People were very easy to say, oh, I'm Genesis or I'm Super Nintendo. And as a result, they would be loyal to those sides. So they would buy those games. They would go out and buy those peripherals. The people who were loyal to Sega, man, they had to buy a bunch of crap, basically, just, but they bought it. And for some part, they loved it. I can't say most part, because for the most part, they did not love it. Good kill. I think we all remember Sega's huge, massive lineup of add-ons and peripherals. The best of which was probably the 32X, which was often called the Super Nintendo upgrade for your Sega Genesis. Which actually wasn't a bad piece of hardware as far as playing, but it was, you needed these grounding plates. I think it took its own power supply. That stuff doesn't make it very easy to use, and that only makes it less appealing. If it snapped right on and that was it, it might have been more appealing. Yeah, don't ask me where that came from. I don't know where that treasure chest just magically appeared. But for me, it was definitely the Super Nintendo. Genesis had some funny things. Genesis had there were some forgotten peripherals, I would say. There was the Activator, which was a motion sensor octagon that went on the floor. Like it came in pieces, and then you put it together on the floor, and it was a controller. You're supposed to stand inside, and you're supposed to punch and kick and stuff like that. And I have one. I traded for it a long time ago, and to be honest, I never actually tried to use it, because I was always under the assumption that even then I was too big, because I figured it would be scaled for a kid, not 5'9". But I'm kind of, I gotta be honest, I'm kind of curious to see if it would even work. Who knows, maybe I'll bring it somewhere. I'll bring it to a convention or something, and we'll set it up and see if some kid wants to try it out. Maybe we can get it to work. It's great because it's not like the Rob or the NES Zapper where it required you to have a CRT. The Power Glove was great because the Power Glove came with a sensor system, so you should be able to use it on any TV. But the Rob and the Zapper are two examples of, they used CRT feedback. Somebody else who's more technical can explain it better, but if you don't, nowadays you have a flat screen TV, they won't work with the flat screen TV. We go to conventions and they have some of that stuff set up. They'll do Duck Hunt tournaments and whatnot, and it has to be on a CRT because a flat screen won't read the light gun. You know, with goofy stuff like the Genesis activator, it had its own sensor system. So to this day, you could still use it. I don't know that you'd want to, but that's interesting, you know. Stands the test of time.